So here we are and the system is broke. American dream has gone up in smoke. So stop sitting there all broken hearted. Let's get this motherfucking party started. Lady Liberty is ringing a bell, and we're driving us straight into hell. But don't worry, we got what you need. Crank up the volume till your eardrums bleed. Gonna make America again.
Welcome everyone to the A Better Way to a podcast. I'm your host, Jordan. Andrew's not here because his life is chaos. Today we are here with John Jackson, who I found on Twitter. Actually, you found me on Twitter, and then I was like, this dude with 34,000 followers is following the page. That's kind of cool. Did a little creep on your profile. Saw that you actually were a cool person and have led quite an interesting life. So I felt like it would be beneficial to have you on the podcast. We have some pretty good conversations, and I can tell we are into the same kind of stuff on the Twitter sphere, or X as the Gen Zers call it. But yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
No, thanks for having me. I really like you guys. I saw your page about the dynamic of making the Second Amendment more open and democratic for everyone, and I think that's very important. It's a right that, like any other fundamental constitutional right, should be belong equally to everyone. So I think it's a really critically important thing to open that up and to make sure that everyone's interests are heard when it comes to gun control and other things.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a good time. We enjoy it and think it's worth doing. But I just realized after I stopped your introduction that I gave probably the worst and least informative introduction I've ever given to a guest on this show.
No worries.
Yeah, no. So John, you've spent some time in Ukraine. You sent me a pretty cool picture of yourself. I sound like such a fanboy right now because I'm like, this. You guys got a cool picture that he sent me. He's in like tactical gear.
I'm a gear dork. I was in UF Pro gear actually, so I was I dork out on that picture myself. So, yeah,
UF Pro gear is like one of the things that, and oh man, who's the camouflage company that makes a super expensive but really good camo?
Cry Precision.
It's like they make ghillie suits. They make oh crap, this is gonna bug me. I'm gonna think of it as soon as we move on. They're like a German company or a Swedish company or something like that. But anyway.
Yeah, I know you're talking about. Yeah, I know Claw Gear. Claw Gear is one that is. I've got some of their stuff. I think they're out of England or somewhere in Europe.
Gotcha. Isn't that weird when European countries, like specifically from the UK, make tactical gear, yet they have the most draconian gun laws in existence?
Yeah, they do. I tell you, it was fascinating to watch a country like Ukraine go from somewhere where, very limited gun ownership, very limited tactical supplies. I mean, the war does go back to 2014.
Yeah,
people don't realize that the invasion started in 2014. The Russian genocide of Ukrainians and attempting to kill them and wipe them off the face of the earth. This goes back centuries, of course. But to watch that tactical industry just take off over the past couple of years, because I was there early 2023, all of 2023, came back for surgery, went back late last year, and just to see how it's exploded. And like, they make great stuff now. Everything from body armor to, it just. To see it go from like 0 to like 100 was a pretty incredible thing to see.
Yeah, it's nuts, man. And you see, so when I first started this, I was getting certain things, nothing like, mission critical or anything like that, but balaclavas and things like that. I was getting them off of Alibaba because, like, I don't hate on the Chinese, manufacturing process. Like, they make good stuff and it's not crazy expensive. Now I know it's cool to hate China and stuff like that, but dude's got to eat, and like the stuff I was getting from them was good. So I was like, why am I going to spend $30 on a balaclava that nobody's going to buy for a markup? But I was noticing on Alibaba there were a ton of Eastern European countries that some of this stuff was coming from, specifically the tactical stuff, and a lot of it was tactical gear marketed towards airsoft. Because you can market something towards airsoft because people see a plate carrier for like $60 and they're like, this is a piece of shit. I would never wear this to save my life, but for airsoft it's great. But then you get some of this stuff and it's like 500 denier nylon, double, triple stitched, like it's decent quality stuff. It's incredibly good quality for the money, but you realize it's just a lot of these companies don't have the reputation to mark up their product the way that some of the American companies do. And I'm not saying go on Alibaba and buy a plate carrier because for cheap because it's going to be just as good as a Cry or Eagle Industries or anything like that. But it was really interesting to see these other countries besides China, besides the Philippines, besides Vietnam, popping up, making their own gear and selling them to the tactical market. So that doesn't surprise me at all. That I mean, what is it? Necessity is the father of invention. You kick off a war in your country, people are going to start making shit for it.
Yeah, I mean, they were like using like fucking steel plates and shit in the beginning, and then like, but now like you get anything you want there. I mean, level 3+ for whatever ceramic, and it's like good stuff. It's indistinguishable. And then like there's also the out of country stuff is also readily available there. I wore an Agilite K0 plate carrier.
Nice.
And so you're definitely able to get you can get Agilite, you can get anything you need basically, even night vision now. It was crazy how it all took off. Thermal cloaks and stuff. They're really good at that because thermal's a big part of that war now.
How comfortable are you with talking about thermal stuff? Because that's something that I've always, I understand what thermal is. I know what thermal is, but a couple of the pages that I follow talk a lot about trying to defeat thermal because that's the new thing. Everybody's using thermal in a war zone, and that's the way that civilians like to LARP now, is they like to do whatever they see in a war zone. And before it was night vision. Now night vision is surpassed by thermal. And obviously they're for two different applications, but it's really interesting to see the kind of things that are effective at defeating thermal. One of the ones I saw recently was the dude was wearing a cardboard box, and it was surprisingly good at not showing his thermal signature through it because it's it's far enough away from the body to where it wasn't absorbing the radiant heat from his body. And it's just funny that things like that work, and people probably spend a ton of money on these high-tech thermal suits that probably do the same thing but for a significantly higher cost. But you're obviously not going to be walking around with a cardboard box in a war zone.
I mean, some of the stuff I can't get too much into, but I will say that like a lot of people don't realize that thermal doesn't go through glass, for example. Won't go through a car window. And a lot of people don't realize there are certain times of the day where thermal is not going to work really that well because of it's just the way that the terrain and the sun mix. There's a part in the beginning of the day and the part at the end of the day where it's not going to work. There's a lot of tactics that go into it. So you see Russians, they'll have like a thermal cloak, but they're not covering their feet or not covering their hands, or they're running or they're moving too much, and the drone operator can still see them. They still hit them, because if they just sat still and on the ground and like they would have been fine. But these guys, the Russians are weird, man. Like they don't bury their dead a lot of times. They will be out there like stragglers, like one or two, like where's this guy's unit? It's just like a random dude walking along.
I've seen those videos
somewhere like fucking 8 Mile in Detroit or like College Park in Atlanta is just like a random drunk dude at 3 a.m. Well, these are like Russian soldiers like that on the battlefield. They're just like detached or whatever. And so like the tactics, the cohesiveness. So thermal is one of those things that really like tests the training of a unit, of an organization, of a battalion, of a brigade, because if they're not doing things right, then it really shows up in that. It's one of those things where there's like so much less room for error in your tactics and how well your command and control operates that you can see it. It's also one of those things too where people got to know how to use it. They got to make sure their scope zeroed. I mean, when you first got out there, you have a lot of people. I mean, I trained a lot of people who were just in like basic shooting skills, like trigger control. And, I remember a guy, he had a SIG MCX with a Trigicon scope on it. And he was like sitting there and with a red Trigicon red dot on top. I mean, this is like a $5,000-$6,000 setup.
Yeah.
But his scope wasn't fucking zeroed, and so we went out to the range, and I had like in an hour and a half, got a scope zeroed, got his trigger control good. And it worked out well for him in a later mission. He got quite a few kills on that. So, just teaching people like the basics of how to use things too is another thing. And there's not a lot of standardization on certain things. Like, when thermal comes out, units will fundraise and they'll get a thermal, throw it on a rifle. So it's a little bit different where there's like a lot of, like in the US military or NATO military, where every unit has the same thing and there's a standard operating procedure for every single thing, making sure everybody knows like is on the same page and how to use it. So, but this should be a good thing. A lot more flexibility and stuff. You're not going to get like in trouble because you wear a hat indoors or whatever the fuck, as you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. I've just gotten used to wearing hats indoors. I was just, it was ingrained into me in boot camp and just throughout the Marines that it was never something I learned from a parent out of respect for people or whatever, but it's something that I've been teaching my daughter because it makes sense to me. Yeah, you take your hat off when you go inside. If she ever asks me why, I'm not going to have an answer for her because I don't know. It's just, it shows respect. Why does it show respect? I don't know. It just does. But, it's so, I'm wearing a hat for the people who are not watching the video of this, I'm wearing a hat right now. And it just serves like a practical purpose because my hair is getting long and it's getting in my face and stuff. Not in my face. It's just kind of nuts. Anyway, something that stuck out to me for what you said was, hey, Andrew.
Let me turn on the light in here.
That's not what you said that stuck out to me. Yeah, you're in the dark. You look like you're looking at porn, trying to hide from your mom. Why do you look soaking wet?
It's really fucking damp out here, dude. It's very humid.
Turn on your AC. He's got central air. Cheap fuck. Anyway, something that stuck out to me that you said was that this dude showed up with like a 6,000. Because I know what optic you're talking about. Before I got out of the Marines, they started.
Is the trigger on ACOG? I feel like an idiot. It was an ACOG. I didn't remember.
Yeah. It's an ACOG with the RMR, or it's the rifle red dot on top of it.
Yeah, and the BDC reticle, so it's got to be zeroed a certain way. And
correct. You said that the guy showed up and he didn't even have it zeroed, and then when you got it zeroed, and you had to teach him trigger control and stuff like that, and then when you got it zeroed, he got a few kills with it, and it's nuts to me. It's like somebody picking up a first-person shooter game, not knowing how to play, and then somebody's like, "Oh, hey, this is how you shoot," and they're like, "Oh, I'm actually good at this." Never done it before in their life, and you put an optic on something that's properly zeroed, and all of a sudden you're able to end people's days.
Yeah, I mean, and this guy was a producer. It was like a filmmaker before the war, you know. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of the people over there that are fighting now they had never picked up a gun in their life before the war. It's not like they say with like America, like, you know, there's a famous Japanese general, maybe it's Yamamoto. He said like, you can't invade America because there'll be a gun behind every blade of grass. But so it's not like it wasn't like that in Ukraine before, you know. And a lot of people, you know, who had never picked up a gun before, you know, so there's the learning curve of trigger manipulation and breathing and control and, you know, and knowing how to use a weapon, but also like how to maintain the weapon and all that. Luckily, a lot of it was AKs in the beginning, so, you know, you didn't have to clean it and work all the time. So
yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing about, you know, the AK being the people's rifle. It's like, it's cheap, it's plentiful, and, you know, I'm talking about like the Russian and Eastern European AKs, not the ones that American leftists are buying because they're $300 on you know, Gunbroker. Not anymore. Not that you can buy them anymore, but like, Andrew, what were the really cheap AKs that people were buying?
Century
like
imports.
Century?
Yeah, Century Arms, right?
Yeah. So they would import parts kits, and then they would kind of, as cheaply as possible, rebuild or manufacture the rest of the parts that they needed.
I had a Wasser, like that was my first AK, which is just like a Romanian, but I think that's a Romanian full build. But I know like the parts kits are coming, and then Century started making with the Castronians that only lasted like a certain, I don't know, a couple thousand rounds.
I know this is not a standard to judge things by, but there's something about Romanian built firearms that makes me like warm and fuzzy. My sister-in-law is Romanian, and that's probably part of it, but I just feel like any country that has fought off, like that has beaten an authoritarian regime, should be making good weapons. Like I'm not an AK guy. I honestly couldn't tell you where a Wasser falls in the lineup. It just, I don't know, that it's cool to me. It's like a Mosin. A Mosin is objectively a shitty rifle now by today's standards, but owning one is fun because it's cool.
So this is the thing. So
it's killed Nazis.
The Mosin Nagant, as well as the AK-47, they are not cheap to build weapons. They are not like shitty designs. They're not like shitty cheap designs. Like, you know, if you make, there's a reason why it's like if you make an AK from scratch here in America, it costs like over $1,000. You know, they're not like stupid guns. You know,
I didn't say it was a stupid gun.
No, but he said people are like, you know, they're cheap and reliable. You know, they're simple guns, cheap and cheerful, and you know, but the reality is the reason that the Soviet AKs were so cheap and so plentiful is because they didn't give a shit about making a profit on guns. They just built as many of them as they could because they wanted to arm a whole bunch of satellite republics and arm rebels and send guns to people that were fighting America. So there was a shit ton of, you know, pretty nice well built AKs that were built without any like notion of getting paid for them.
I got issued an AK-74, and I took over a forend and Geisley trigger. I took over, like, in case I got an M4, whether I got an AK-74, whichever one I got, I had the kit for it. But I took over a Midwest Industries Alpha kit for the AK-74, so you can mount optics. I had a 3x magnifier, Vortex Micro, and then a Sig Sauer Romeo 4T. And now I have a 4XT. I love it. But when I took that over, I got the rifle, and it was like a little rough on the outside. But when I shot it, I mean, it, like, no shit, was 1.5 to 2 MOA at 100 yards. And it had never been shot much, really, is the thing. You know, like, the outside is probably 15 years old rifle, but
most of these, like, Soviet era rifles were not shot a lot. They were built and loaded in crates, and they existed mostly on paper, you know. Like,
there's some guy, there's some cop at a train station who's like using it.
Only dropped once.
Yeah. Exactly.
But, you know, they got, you know, cold hammer forged barrels, and they were made well, man. And it was fucking worked every time. Good trigger.
There was a whole era of them. They were fucking milled receivers. Like, they took a giant block of fucking metal and milled the receiver out of it, which is insane. You wouldn't do that if you were selling these, you know. But that's just that they were like, you know, they're making modern rifle, you know.
Yeah, right.
Dude, shout out to Midwest Industries. We're not sponsored by them or anything, but I've had nothing but good experiences with them. Every time I order something from them, their customer service is fantastic. You brought them up, I think twice, but talking about the same thing. I want to do a better job about, like, calling out companies that actually do a good job, because there's so many companies that suck in this space.
I took it over there and I was like, I hope this fucking works. I think it fit perfect, you know. It was easy to install, and it was durable, you know. So I was very happy with it.
I wanted to talk to you about, so you and I were talking earlier, and you mentioned that you have kids, and, you know, you went to Ukraine. You said you were so for the people who were listening before, which is everyone, because you've gotten to this point in the podcast, Andrew, I gave like a totally unsurprisingly shitty intro for John. I was like, he's a cool guy. We're gonna talk to him. It's gonna be great. Said nothing about him.
It's because your mojo was off because I was late.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But I'm making up for the lack of mojo. So no. So I
gotta spit out my gum. Shit.
No, you don't have to spit out your gum. Just don't chew it into the microphone when our guest is speaking. We've had a lot of rough episodes, specifically in the beginning of this, where, like, our group chat,
learning basic podcast etiquette,
just basic, not even podcast etiquette, just basic etiquette, just basic manners with people,
just basic human fucking decency.
But both of us, though, like, he'll be chewing gum, I'll be falling asleep. Like, there's
it's okay. I spent a year shitting in a bag and throwing it in a minefield in Ukraine. So
there you go.
Yeah. Oh no, what I was gonna say is our last episode that we did with Bryn Woods which actually is lost into the ether, so nobody's ever going to know this.
I can't fucking believe that.
I have no fucking clue what happened. But anyway, super cool episode. She's down to record again because she's an absolute saint. But I brought a bottle of whiskey down with me, and I got progressively more drunk as the podcast went on. It hit me like a sack of bricks, dude. I was like, I don't know, I think I might have had 4 glasses, but they were very liberal pours. And because it's only me, who would I have to impress? It's just thousands of people that listen to this. Anyway, yeah, towards the end, Andrew was messaging me. He was like, dude, it's time to wrap up.
Like,
you're slurring your words bad.
He was starting to slur, and like clearly like droopy eyes, and I was like, we gotta get.
Yeah, man. No, the video was buffering, man. That's what it was.
Yeah. So I've got an allotted amount of whiskey. It's, you know what it is. It's a late night recording for us. Need a little pep in the step, and whiskey's always a good morale booster. But anyway, I digress. So Ukraine kicked off. You decided to go over there. What made you say, okay, this is something I want to take part in?
Well, I mean, so I had no military experience. I had kind of going back sort of in my life, what brought me to the point where I cared a lot about what's happening in another country. So I grew up in Atlanta, the home of Martin Luther King. So that's a big influence on me. His perspective on, because that's where he's from. That's where he's buried. That's where the National Historic Site is. Always been someone I've looked up to a lot. And his fundamental concept, a lot of people call him a civil rights leader, and he was that. But more than that, he was a philosopher. And that the unity of mankind, that what happens to people in other parts of the world is just as much our responsibility as if it was my neighbor. Ronald Reagan, too, growing up during the Cold War, it was a concept of, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, which is in our, Declaration of Independence, in our Constitution. Those are God-given rights. Abraham Lincoln said, those, if they're God-given rights, then it doesn't matter what state you're in. And then Ronald Reagan gave a famous speech that said, well, it's actually not so famous, but a speech nonetheless saying, recognizing that, well, if that's true, then these are rights not just to people in every state, but everywhere in the world. And that's how we kind of brought that into this, putting those sort of philosophical ideas that have been embedded in me from a young age. And no, I had some people in my family, my half-brother's side of the family, who were in the Hungarian uprising against communism. And then when I was about 4 years old, my dad, I was a victim of a parental kidnapping and taken to live in South Africa during apartheid for a couple of years.
Christ. What the fuck?
What the fuck?
What?
Yeah. So he was from South Africa. He came over here to get back at my mom, like parental kidnapping. He's typically used the kid that, as an emotional weapon. So I was like, it was like the height of apartheid. So I'm like, we're in Johannesburg. There's fucking paratroopers and armored personnel carriers. And
Bro, most parents kidnap their kids to a motel. That's nuts. He kidnapped you to South Africa.
Africa, yeah. Well, because back then, it was under UN arms embargo. And it was like the legal equivalent of like what North Korea is now. It's, or Russia, where like...
Oh, so they couldn't just like send the FBI to be like, all right, you got to give the kid back.
No, right. Yeah. Interpol wasn't doing it. He was probably doing God knows what to get around arms embargoes. I mean, he was well embedded with the government. So, I was kind of stuck there. My mom actually, people like, how'd you get back? It was an Interpol. Like, no, my mom tricked him, so she was pretty clever. He said, oh, I'll get back together with you. And he got me back. But,
oh, sick.
I've been growing up with Martin Luther King. I've been growing up during the Cold War. And, my babysitter is another thing I forgot to mention. Before I got kidnapped, my babysitter was, these were Cambodian refugees who fled to Khmer Rouge, okay, and Pol Pot. And, the father of my babysitter was crippled because he was an engineer in intelligentsia, so that, anybody educated, they had tortured and stuff. And so I had like all this exposure to like different bad things in the world about oppression. I just think that left a strong imprint on me personally. But yeah, I was never in the military. I have ADHD. I took medication most of my life. So I wasn't going to qualify to be in the military. So I was like,
oh, dude, you qualify. You just don't take your medication and you're a fucking insane person.
When I was 18 and they sent recruiters to the school, they told me that I wasn't eligible because I took amphetamines after age 12.
Yeah. Oh, see, my recruiter was like, get him in there. And I just didn't take my Adderall. I just didn't take my Adderall for 6 years, dude. And I was a fucking menace.
And I was then kind of fast forward to like 20. So the initial invasion kicked off in 2014. And obviously, as we were talking historically, Russia's been trying to wipe Ukraine off the map for centuries. So there was the Holodomor in the 30s where millions of people died. People were literally eating each other because the Russians had starved them. There was the Stalin purges in the late 1930s where there's literally a mass grave where I did a video for either Twitter or Instagram or both. But when I was there's a mass grave with a fucking 250,000 people in it. Okay. That were killed by Stalin's purges, and I just wanted to mention that. And going back, this history of Russia doing stuff to Ukraine goes back a long ways. So the war kicked off in 2014, the initial war, shot down a fucking airliner. I mean, everybody knew about that horrible history. And then 2022 happens, and I'm working as an attorney, but I'm like really sick of my career. I'm fucking, I'm working all the time. I have ADHD. I'm taking, my medication, probably a little too much because I'm working like 6 days a week, so 70 hours a week, getting fucking migraines, getting kidney infections. Like really, it's fucking up my health. So it was at the point in my life where I was able to be like, look, I can go over there and do something. And I just felt this. I mean, it's hard to explain. You feel like this overwhelming.
Hold on. Your fucking your legal career was killing you so immediately.
I was just thinking this. You're like, let's do war.
To a war zone
and get healthy.
Yeah, Brad. Let me. It sounds crazy.
No. I 100% believe that.
Yeah, I'd rather be in a firefight than answer another goddamn email. So
yes.
I hope this email fails you well. How this email found me.
Exactly. And I was just so I mean I ended up over there. I had a lot of experience like shooting guns and building weapons.
That's what I was going to ask. You're like a gun guy already, right? You have no military experience.
Right.
You understand the mechanics of guns, shooting guns. You understand ballistics and stuff like that. So you're not like going over there with nothing. You have like information and experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like building AR-15s, building Polymer 80s back when they were still legal where I am, shooting long range, short range. You did quite a bit of hunting and stuff. So understood like the concepts of concealment and movement and things like that. But just not like the concepts of like working in a squad or a unit or part of overall maneuvers and things like that. I was fortunate to get in a group of foreign fighters that were. So I got a lot of good training when I was over there in those things. But yeah, man, like I was just, and I had 2 kids, obviously, and my daughters are 10 and 13, and I had always raised them to want to be about like I'd take them to Ukraine rallies, I took them to the Martin Luther King Memorial. I'd always taught them about what's important in life. My ex-wife, her parents came from Pakistan, so they understood oppression and and things like that. So I just had all these experiences, and like, yeah, how do you go and tell like your family, hey, well, I'm going to Ukraine, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, I was like, so I kind of lied, honestly. I was like, hey, I'm going to Poland to volunteer. Okay. I'm going to volunteer and help them. And, and I was like,
because you figure if you're like, I'm going to go fight on the front lines, they'll be like, absolutely the fuck not,
Right. Yeah. So like, I bought all my kit and stuff and, but I didn't have any experience with like, fuck, what kind of plates do I get? I figured all that out because I'm pretty much like a massive gear dork, as I'm sure we all are. And, I took like 3 giant bags over there. I think I had like $1,000 baggage fees when I went over there the first time.
Hell yeah.
And flew into Warsaw. Fucking took a train because you can't fly in. It took shit, man. Like a 15-hour train from Poland over into Ukraine. I was there. So
that must be like a really interesting trip to like take the last leg by train, and it's like long and slow, and you got all your gear, and you're like, I'm really going.
You got to think.
I'm really doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a trip because like I remember going in to Poland, like there was this, again, like this overwhelming force. I felt like nothing I'd ever experienced in my life. I believe in God and Jesus and all that, but I'm not religious. Never really went to church, but I this overwhelming, like, people say, oh, you're brave for going over there. First of all, humility is a big part of like professionalism as being a soldier. So I'm never saying I'm going to be brave or anything like that. The brave ones are like the mothers in bomb shelters and the kids who go to school every day. But number 2, I'm not brave. I had no choice but to go. I had to go there, like it wasn't an option for me to do that. Something commanded me and pushed me there, but I'm riding over on the train from Poland into Ukraine. And, I had this experience, where it's probably 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Sun's just barely peeking over. So like, beautiful sunrises in Ukraine. It's very humid. So the sunrises are very colorful, and I'm on this train and everybody's asleep right now. It's just, there's no men because nobody can leave if they're between 18 and 60, but it was old men, mothers, children. When people are sleeping, they all have the same facial expression. That's when like an old man even looks like a little girl, and it just in their facial expression. And as I'm walking through this train, I'm going back to like the food car or whatever. I'm like, I just got this feeling like these people are all asleep. They're all peaceful. And I'm like, I felt a grave responsibility for these Ukrainians who maybe didn't speak the same language as me, but were clearly in a situation where they were fighting for their lives and did nothing wrong whatsoever in a completely unprovoked war of aggression in Europe. And I was like, that's when it just kind of really hit me. Like, it was almost like a religious experience to think I'm responsible for all these people. So that was definitely a trip to get there and see that. I made a lot of contacts there because I had represented some journalists and stuff and people in fundraisers, and they'd have trouble with their bank back in America. Cause let's say you do a fundraiser and you have like a buy me a coffee or whatever, the Russians will call and be like, oh yeah, he's buying nuclear weapons, and they'll shut down the account. So I had helped some people, so I had some contacts there. I kind of knew what to expect. I was fortunate for that. It was
funny. I just send Venmo to people, and I'm like, "This is for deadly drones," and like I've never had any issues.
Venmo's like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
This is, dude. There's literally people who like I'll fuck with my friends and send unhinged like memos with little dollar amounts. Like, this is for literal crack cocaine. And Venmo's like, send it.
Yeah.
I sent my wife like it was like $3,000 or something for her credit card. We were like paying off some accounts or something, and I said, bribe to stay with me.
I just think it's funny how like, short of a complete governmental collapse, like none of us are ever going to be able to set foot in Russia ever in our lives, with like, John, you obviously, but like the amount of like causes, like pro-Ukrainian causes that a lot of us have like donated
never
to.
mind pro-Ukrainian causes, memes and like posts
the memes.
And shit. Dude, they've arrested people. They've arrested people
would get us
for
thrown
the
to
shit.
the fucking gulags.
I made memes with the backdrop of a RPG warhead with a Santa beard on it. In like the final frame of the drone FPV footage right before it
Yeah.
murked a fucking squad of Russians, and we're laughing at that 6,000
Yes.
miles away. Like that's
Yeah.
and I'm using it for like completely unreal. It's not like I'll have to send you the memes, John, at face value or at just explaining this. I'm not going to do a good job, but it doesn't do it justice. But I promise it's funny. You had to be there.
Does it ever feel strange to you how like I feel like I've lost a little bit of my humanity in that like I just like don't even give a shit about it used to like make me kind of sad when I'd see like Russian soldiers just getting like obliterated. But now I don't. Now I feel like
I think I think that it's well, I don't think there's like a good or a bad way morally that you should feel, because I think everyone's everyone's feelings are subjective. But, on one hand, I think, well, if you're a Russian and you're still there, then you deserve it.
Okay, so if you thought you were on training and you ended up in Ukraine and you got blown up, like that's kind of sad. That sucks. But now, like if you signed up for the fucking bonuses, like
well, that's different. Dude. That's different. But like we don't live in an authoritarian government, and we don't live like where the threat of our family being gulagged is constantly lingering overhead. That's what I mean, though. Like really authoritarianism, not like American authoritarianism.
Give it time.
I know. Oh, I know. We're in like 1930s Germany right now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's 36, 35, 32. Yeah, the thing is now, I mean, and since after the first wave, because you have to understand, they invaded with like 180 to 200,000 people, and like they have 800,000 casualties, and probably 500,000 of those are people fatalities and stuff. So like the army they invaded with has been killed like 3 times.
It's gone.
That's nuts,
dude.
Yeah, I know.
That's nuts.
It absolutely fucking smoked. Yeah,
the human element of that, the loss, is incredible. Like when I think about that, it makes me sad. When I think about it in general,
the sheer volume of human consciousness flushed down the drain. Yeah.
Yeah. What is that? What is that quote? And and just like that, a million voices cried out and were instantly silenced.
Like fucking Alderaan.
Bro.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Oh, that's what it was. Oh, I'm so excited for Andor season 2. Anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, but the thing is, like, when you start meeting Ukrainians and you meet people who lived under occupation in Mariupol, you sit there and you see and you go like, there's like tens of thousands of Ukrainian children that have been forcibly abducted and taken back to Russia.
Yeah, and nobody knows they're there. They're just gone.
Yeah, and like and the barbaric nature of what Russia has done to Ukraine again for centuries, and I mean even Chernobyl again was like they didn't care about Ukrainians. They lied to them. Like people found out in Ukraine found out about Chernobyl. They found out Chernobyl from Voice of America. They couldn't rely upon the Russian government to do that. Like it's a trip though, man. Like we have this concept of life in America where, where's my parking spot? How long do I have to wait in line at Starbucks? But then you go to like Eastern Ukraine and the shit you see, like a fucking, cruise missile like flying overhead at like 11 in the morning, or you're eating a sandwich. They have a place called Lviv Croissants, for example, where there's like an Einstein's, and me and my unit commander are sitting there in Kramatorsk, which is, I don't know, it was like at that point it was like 20, 30 kilometers from the front line, maybe 40. But like it was like the last outpost of a city before the actual combat. And I'm like eating, and it's like 3 PM. Birds are chirping. People are out all around, like normal. City's like half occupied. But again, like, and all of a sudden here's this boom, so it's pretty fucking loud. And I kind of went like this because he made fun of me and shit. He's like, don't worry. This is kind of vulgar. Can I say something vulgar? Okay, I'm gonna say something vulgar. Yeah. He says, don't worry, if we get blown up, my dick will get blown off and it will land in your mouth. So remember that. I'm like, fuck you. We're finished eating it. We get in the car, we start going back to the team house, and like literally a block away, there's a fucking 300 millimeter, like a 6-foot missile sitting in the middle of the fucking road.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say there's a dick in the middle of the road.
Yeah. No, that'd be funny. Yeah. 6-foot dick. That'd be mine. Just kidding. So
hey.
But like you see that shit, and then you're like in Izium, and you see mass graves. I mean, where there was like hundreds of women and children in these mass graves. You see apartment buildings like blown in half with 1,000-pound bombs, and
an apartment building next to a fucking ammo depot. Okay, I get what they were going for, but like an apartment building in the middle of a residential area that's not next to
Right.
anything. Like, what were they fucking shooting at?
Maternity hospitals, they used in
Yeah.
Kyiv, they used a hypersonic like $10 million missile on a
Yeah,
fucking children's
because they
campus.
really wanted to hit that hospital. Like, wait, like,
Yeah.
what's the plausible deniability? They don't even give a shit. It doesn't matter to them.
It's like ISIS or Al Qaeda
Yeah.
or Islamic Jihad with like the fucking world's
Or
third
Israel.
largest army, and
Yeah. Or Israel, yeah. I saw a slideshow this morning that was it started with a group of kids, like 15 to 18-year-old, standing around this apartment complex that had been blown apart because one of their friends lived there, and the parents' body had been found, but not their friend. And after something like 14 hours, they finally found the body and brought it out. But they were just standing there, like everybody that came out, they were just running up to it or asking questions and trying to see if that was their friend.
it's an entire different like concept of life, and I was in Kherson too when they blew up the dam. Like they blew a fucking dam up and flooded the entire city.
Yeah.
And I tell people like I was in Hurricane Katrina, like I was there like right in the aftermath, like help volunteering, and it was like Katrina, but there's air raid sirens, artillery, and fucking sniper fire. You're like pulling cats, dogs, old ladies out, where their first responders were like putting people in the water, putting like boats into the water, and also putting these things called Sherpas, which are like amphibious vehicles that are made there. Well, there's a lot of first responder, and I'm standing there like with my team about to go out and like, on a boat. And I'm like, there's fucking a lot of police officers and firefighters here. Russia's probably going to try to launch a missile or hit us with artillery. No air defense, by the way, east of, Kharkiv at that time. Which were ways to that. Like, let's pull back, and like, this is kind of the mentality you have to have. If you're in a gathering and there's first responders, you're probably going to be targeted by these fucking barbarians on the Russian side. We pull back maybe 200 meters, and literally 3 minutes later, 152 artillery, boom, 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 boom. The whole fucking sky is fucking red. And if a shell hadn't hit a steeple and knocked the phone out of my hand and turned it off, I run into an alley and jump on this girl who has no body armor, and I'm like, and where I had just been standing, it was like there's a bunch of dead people, right? The whole concept of like your concept of reality, how barbaric they are, there's no rules of war. They're just trying to terrorize people. It's crazy. That's like a trip and something that it's hard to understand, So when you see them getting killed and stuff, and that on these videos, and like we're Americans, like we're normal people. We're for the most part try to have some morals and some decency and some concept of life and the value of human life. And like that guy got paid $25,000 to join the military. 85 to 90% of Russians, as polled now, still support the invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And like they have guns and they could turn them on the commanders that are trying to shoot them in the back or whatever it may be. So it's just like, and then you hear the recordings. That's the other thing that was crazy too. Is the recordings of the Russians calling their family members back and saying, and there's a famous case of a woman who said, she was talking to her husband.
Yeah, she told him that it's not cheating if you rape Ukrainian girls.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
She's like, just don't tell me about it.
I try to have like a nuanced perspective of everything that I come into contact with because I default to the thought that I don't know everything, and I leave room. It's like leaving room for the unknown. But then I hear certain stories like this, and I turn into my like racist uncle who just wanted to glass the Middle East.
Yeah.
Except instead of the Middle East, I'm like Russia. Let's just glass.
Just start
Russia.
over.
We'll just
and I feel
start
bad
over.
because I'm sure, like,
I know there are good Russians.
Victims of brain. Well, but I
No,
understand that,
dude. There 100% are, because I've talked to people from like the queer community. I've talked to people from like anarchist groups from Russia. Like they live there, and there are people who cannot get out. But
also like even the ones that have like reprehensible opinions, ostensibly they're like victims of brainwashing, like people in America that are like, we got to glass the Middle East. Like they didn't just come to that because they were born with hate in their hearts. This is the response to propaganda.
Exactly.
And it's the same way for a lot of Russians, either they really don't know any better and they've been so heavily fucking zooted on propaganda that there's no coming back, or they're just afraid to fucking, if they do know better and they do know what they're saying is vile, they're afraid to say anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like when I see someone when you see like an FPV video or somebody getting killed, it's just like, well, I mean, that's a human life. It's gone. I believe in God. So yeah, it's bad, but that's, that's one child less that's not going to get raped,
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
So-
there's no room for nuance when the guy's trying to kill you. And
Yeah.
at that point,
Right.
the only thing that is going to change that person's opinion is a bullet or a bomb.
I mean, here's another thing a lot of people don't understand. In 1994, when the Cold War when the Cold War was over and Russia fell, Ukraine had the world's third largest nuclear arsenal. Okay, larger than
Yeah.
France, larger than
Yeah.
England, larger than fucking China even.
Yeah.
And the U.S. wanted them to give up those weapons, which were worth like $2 trillion, and not just the nukes, but strategic bombers. Like their Tu-23s, basically the same as like a B-1 bomber.
Yeah.
And like hundreds and hundreds of long-range cruise missiles. And they're like, okay, we'll give these up, but you got to protect us because these fucking, these Russians have fucking invaded us for hundreds of years. And we signed these security assurances. And like, that was, like in the global framework, the way it works is the reason we don't have like 50 nations with nuclear weapons, because look, let's be honest, South Korea, Japan, Saudi Arabia, these nations have the industrial capacity to develop nuclear weapons pretty quickly if they wanted to. The way that we keep them from doing that and keep the world safe is through our security guarantees that we have with them, our treaties we have with them. And in Ukraine was, non-proliferation was a big part of like making this world safe. And Ukraine was the one nation that stuck its neck out the most, and it had this vicious neighbor to the north. And then when you find out about that, and it's like, fuck, they did the right thing. Now they're getting invaded. Now everybody else is not ever going to trust us again. They're going to want to get nuked. So there's also like that. There's that real big unfairness to the fact that kind of what happened to them geopolitically and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now they're talking about they're debating about like security assurances from America now for like a ceasefire, and I'm like, who takes that seriously? Like
Right,
they
yeah.
already had that, and it didn't do them any good.
The security assurances are going to have to be giving like advanced weapons and like tomahawks and things like that, because promises, I mean, they've relied on that before. And
Here's
I
the
don't know, man.
security assurance: our president is going to get on Twitter and tell Vladimir Putin he's got to stop, and that's all the assurance
But he won't.
that you should need.
Well, and that's the thing is like, there's a difference between an assurance from a government who has a reputation, and a recent reputation, because we have an election every 4 years, of backing up their promises and actually putting their money where their mouth is. But we haven't had that, and we haven't even had that with Biden. He was putting a line in the sand with Russia, and Russia kept pushing, and Biden did nothing. It was Putin kept calling his bluff, and there was nothing, no reciprocation from the U.S. So our promise to protect Ukraine in that sense was hollow. And so I definitely agree with Andrew in the sense that if there's going to be any promises made, it has to be in the form of equipment that can protect.
Right. And Ukraine's willing to buy the equipment now. And now they're like, the war has changed so much that now it used to be 70% of casualties were artillery. Now 70% are caused by drones. And the drone innovation just changed warfare as a completely Ukrainian invention.
Yeah.
I mean,
The U.S. Marine Corps just adopted its first FPV drone unit.
yeah, I saw that. And they innovate first with a lot of things, it seems like, especially with,
First to fight, brother.
Well, it's like, I mean, think about it. When was the last time we had a war between first world countries? That's a big thing.
2014.
Is that, yes, I'm just saying like that's a war that people didn't even really realize was going on, to be honest. I mean, we were so consumed with the Middle East. And when you have a war between a world superpower and let's face it, a third world country, there's no reason to innovate, really. Because you're not pushed to innovate. When you have a first world country fighting a first world country, developing technology to get the upper hand, not even developing technology, they literally bought drones off the shelf and just started utilizing them differently. That introduced this whole new concept of warfare that we were not prepared for at all. And thank God it wasn't us on the receiving end of those. But, our government has surely paid attention to that.
well, that's like the value of the experience. I mean, like, and being embedded in learning these things, I mean, is so invaluable for us, for the technology and so forth. I mean, like, usually these are lessons that, like, as for example, World War II in the Pacific, we realized, oh shit, the Japanese Zero is actually way better than us. We need to we need to come up. Our F4 is not good. We need the F6, and we need new fighters and things like that. Those are things that were learned in blood. Now we can learn these things. The Ukrainians are not asking for our soldiers. They're just our old equipment. And then most of the money that's spent, you say, oh, it's like $90 billion, $100 billion, or $60 billion, whatever it may be.
This is my favorite fucking lie of the anti-Ukrainian like media fucking blob. Like, oh, they're spending billions of dollars, just barrels of cash. I'm like, no, actually, it's the fucking paper value of old equipment that you could never sell for that much. If that money, if these old Bradleys sold on the open market, they would not get that much money. But that's a really good value that we put on paper when we ship it over there. All that equipment that we ship over there, that money, that dollar value, we're gonna get that cycled back through our economy when we spend that money with fucking giant
new
defense
ones.
Contractors again to build new ones.
Well, and they're rebuilding the defense industrial base. I mean, like most of that money ends up being reinvested to pay for new equipment, to pay for American jobs, our ammunition, and even like JD Vance's hometown for in Lima, Ohio, the M1A2 tank plants, and then also because of this war, Poland has bought hundreds of Abrams tanks. I mean, so all this like financially.
Yeah, let's see if anybody buys Abrams tanks again though. After they get the fucking supply line cut off.
Yeah, I tell you, the biggest beneficiary of Donald Trump and this war is South Korea and their K2 Black Panther tanks, the K9 artillery
coming
pieces.
up, bud.
Yeah.
Why? Because people can't get Abrams parts anymore?
No, because they're afraid that they're going to get cut off if they say something mean to Donald Trump.
Right.
There's a huge supply tail behind the Abrams that makes the Abrams work. You don't just buy the Abrams, you buy the whole system. You're buying a subscription, basically.
Yeah.
Which is good, which is fine, if you don't think that they're just going to get like upset and just, tell no more parts.
No more
You
takes
should
for
have
you.
said thank you and please and sorry.
You should have said please and thank you, or I'm going to kill you like the Pope.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. Like you see Donald Trump in the fucking Oval Office the other day, and Ukraine's like, hey, we want to buy, spend $20 billion to buy a few Patriot batteries. We'll fucking just we'll buy the shit, take my fucking money. Okay.
Yeah.
And, and it's Ukrainian money. And they're like,
sorry, we got to ask Putin first.
Yeah. Well, when Ukraine started the war, they should have known. It was, what? Like what fucking out of left field, upside down shit are you talking about? So you want to start this trade war, but you don't want to take our money. I mean, we need those jobs. We need to take the money. So all signs support. I mean, like it's in America's interest to support this.
Yeah. All signs point to yes.
You're making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You're gonna get the fucking the CIA award for excellence in journalism pretty soon.
Yeah, but what about the fucking guy who was just killed fighting for Russia? And he was like the CIA director's fucking son.
Well, the crazy thing is that Russia had the deputy director's fucking son. They didn't know.
Yeah, who was in the group chat that said, oh, so the CIA doing what the CIA does, or whatever it was.
Yeah, somebody said that. One of our group chats with SecDef had Seth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Right, but he had they had this pretty valuable guy. I mean, like for they could have used him for something like as a pawn or something, and instead they just sent him on a fucking meat wave because they're Russians and they weren't, they didn't know who they even had working in the military. And there's a picture going around of a guy looking up. There's like first person view of like is an FPV drone about to hit him. It looked just like him. I don't know if it's him or confirmed or not, but
yeah, it's pretty funny how people hunt these. It could be photoshopped, but I've definitely seen like videos of like prominent Russian mill bloggers getting fucking gacked in trenches and stuff. And they'll do like a freeze frame and then like a fucking selfie they took like 24 hours before.
Right. No, I know. Yeah. I mean, like they're so many,
I love the internet.
I know. It's like I don't have the internet
crazy,
for that kind of hatred, but I love that someone does.
Yeah, exactly. I love that somebody will take a person's most vulnerable moment, a person who objectively sucks, a person's most vulnerable moment of them milliseconds before death, reconciling with all of the decisions they've made that have led them up to this particular moment.
Yeah.
And then they'll make a fucking meme out of it. And then they make a meme out of it and it goes on the internet. Get wrecked, bitch.
Yeah, to go back, say, look, do not come here. Stop agreeing to fight.
Yeah.
If they give you weapons, shoot your commander.
Listen, that's the thing. That's, I would like to think that if somebody ever invaded the U.S., especially now with all the boomers dying off and millennials kind of like taking the torch to, actually do things. And I don't imagine my parents' generation picking up rifles. I imagine a scenario where there are going to be a bunch of like millennials literally teabagging like invading forces
Yeah.
because
Well,
that's what we grew up
The
with.
meme war is going to be
The
a big part
meme
of it.
war, the meme war. Listen, psychological warfare on some real shit. Psychological warfare is a war,
Yeah.
and that can be the difference between winning or losing a war because demoralizing or incentivizing the population is huge. If you take a video of a person teabagging an AI version of Putin dead in the mud because ChatGPT accepted the prompt, that's fucking gold. That's awesome.
Right.
Somebody in Spartan armor teabagging Putin.
Here's the
Anyway.
thing too, but though, like it really actually, like, we're joking, but it is actually super fucking important because it's not
No, I am
just
serious.
Ukraine and Russia fighting. It's Ukraine and Russia fighting for the fucking support of the entire rest of the world. So yeah, the memes kind of do matter.
Yeah.
We just had this conversation with Jackie from our last episode that just came out. Jackie Billings talking about how memes win wars. John, I wanted to talk to you about, we could talk about Ukraine for like literally another hour or more, honestly. So one of the tenets of A Better Way to A is the fact that like people are nuanced, people are complicated. Opinions should change with time if exposed to new information. One of the first things you have in your Twitter bio,
Twitter bio.
one of the first things you have in your Twitter bio, like literally. Bro, by the way, my wife hates when I do that voice. Hates.
She doesn't like it. She doesn't like it.
She literally doesn't like it at all. This is the first time I ever heard
Good
her
thing
use
she
the
doesn't
word.
listen to these fucking episodes.
Yeah, good thing. It's the first time I ever heard her use the word ick.
You want to be intimate tonight?
Yeah, she hates it. She calls it a baby voice, and I'm like, honey, that does not do it justice, because it's more than that. It's more than a baby voice. It's J.D. Vance's voice. No, it's
She an adult and never learned how
man.
to talk.
well, she just literally doesn't even understand humor. Anyway,
It's the voice of a grown man who fucked a couch.
Yeah, that too. The Eve that launched 1,000 boats.
I don't even know what I was saying. Oh yeah, your Twitter bio. I almost said it again. I literally just said it again. Twitter bio. Twitter bio. I could just say X, but I refuse to. We
dead name X.
Yeah, we dead
That's
name
Right,
X in this house.
right.
One of the first things on your Twitter bio says former GOP. And whenever somebody goes from one position to another, I always like to point it out because I think it highlights the fact that it's possible in a world where people frame their beliefs on the assumption that it's not. People judge people and assume that their identity revolves around their politics. And I've always taken the position that politics are a result of a perspective. And the way that you change somebody's politics, if you want to, is by giving them a different perspective and by relating to them. I wanted to ask you how are you former GOP? What does that mean?
So people ask, like, okay, yeah, I mean, I identified the strongest reason I supported Republicans as like a McCain Republican, if you will, is strong foreign policy. John McCain gave a great speech, and it was about a bill on Ukraine around 2014. And, I've posted it before on my Twitter, but it's what he basically said was one of the proudest aspects of me being a Republican is that basically, we stand up for people in times of need, and we have principles and values of freedom around the world. We're going to stand up to totalitarianism. We're going to stand up, for the principles of freedom and equality and things of that nature. That's what I believed in, and I was like socially, I'm pretty liberal, honestly, but it was like my most important thing. My main issue was strong foreign policy and leading the world, because we're the ones and we have obligation to do that. Nobody else can. And it's something we should embrace. We should be proud of that. I mean, it's, like, oh, we're not the world's policeman, or we're, it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but like the fact that we can spend 1% of our budget with USAID and save millions of fucking people around the world and give malaria medication to kids in Africa, and to save, starving babies around the world and stuff. I mean, the fact we can give job training to somebody in Sudan so they don't become a terrorist, but they can actually find, live a life where they actually have a job and they can have a family and pay for a house and stuff. I mean, I think that's amazing,
Nah, bro, that's woke.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, saving babies is woke. But then, and I did vote for Donald Trump the first time, 2016. But then we had January 6th, and I was like, wait, what the fuck? And then we had this slow deterioration of the Republican Party, not being about principles, but being about Donald Trump, okay? And whatever he says. And then the right-wing media ecosystem where it was like, left is right, upside down is right side up. It doesn't matter. Like they'll just say fucking anything,
Yeah.
and no matter what it is, no matter how awful it is, there's no principles. And, they became kind of started to be like pro-Russian in a way. I mean, and I saw that, and then like Ukraine happened, and there wasn't the strong support for it. I'm like, and that was it. January 6th and Ukraine. I don't know what fucking party this is. This is not the party of Reagan. This is not the party of Teddy Roosevelt. This is not the party of Lincoln. This is some other fucking party. This is like something that's never happened before. This is fascism. So
yeah,
it's fucking nuts.
Yeah, and I'm still like, pro Second Amendment. I have a lot of conservative values on, and things of that nature. But, but like, it seems like now, like for when a Republican candidate has traditional conservative values, it's just by chance, and it just happens by accident,
Yeah.
So that's kind of how like the process went for me.
Just kind of feeling alienated from mainstream conservatism.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I really want to, dude, I wish I could. What was it called when Han Solo was cast in that mold?
Frozen in carbonite?
Yes. I want to freeze this in carbonite for people, because what I tell people, it sounds way cooler when I say one of the tenets of a better way to A. One of the things that I tell people is like, I don't think the majority of conservatives are MAGA conservatives. I do think the majority of conservatives are McCain conservatives, like yourself, or like how you were. I just think that they feel more comfortable identifying as conservative than liberal because of the culture war that has surrounded politics. I hate speaking in absolutes because only Siths deal in absolutes.
That's true. Only.
Only.
Deals in absolutes.
Fuck you.
No
Shut
one
up.
else.
Shut up. Shut up. Oh man, that go down that rabbit hole of the lore that the Jedi are actually in bed with the Sith. But anyway, I really just want to hammer home to people that opinions can change if given the proper context to information. And I give you a ton of credit for being one of the people who are vocal about your opinions changing, because I think people feel shame when they start thinking differently than the people they surround themselves with. And as a result, kind of goes into this like cyclical behavior where they feel different, they feel bad because nobody around them feels the same, so they convince themselves that what they're feeling is incorrect and that they need to go back to what they were originally feeling. In order to do that, they have to ignore certain facts and certain information. So whenever I see somebody who comes out and says like, hey, I used to be this, but now I'm this, regardless of whether it's political, religious, just any kind of mainstream ideology, I think it really takes a person of like, I don't know how to say this without sounding like an asshole, but like a higher level of cognitive function. I'm not sucking your dick here. Like, I'm just saying, it's physically impossible. You're 2 time zones away from me. I'm just saying, like, we've been conditioned at this point in our lives, like, to discredit any kind of conflicting information when it goes against what we believe. For you to buck that status quo shows that like you haven't subscribed to that
principles. No, I appreciate that. I mean, man, I think it's just like the way I look at it is, my political affiliation may change, but my principles didn't. Like I stayed, the core principles of like standing up for the little guy and caring about, people who are less fortunate and, trying to like do the right thing and, and to have like morality is okay to have as part of your foreign policy or part of your government and things of that nature, where it can't just be all transactional. You have to actually have principles that matter to you as a country, as a nation, as a people. Like the principles stay the same, fundamentally, but they're reflected better by different political movements over time, and the GOP just stopped fucking caring about people, period. It was just all about transactional stuff and cult shit. And I hope now, like I see this now with people in my family who've like voted for Trump, and I'm just like, well, okay, I know that you think that he's, yes, immigration was illegal immigration. Maybe that was a problem. Maybe the border's too open. But he's selling Trump 2028 hats and making money off them.
That's fucking weird.
I know. I'm threatening to run a third term like a fucking Vladimir Putin, okay? And to me, that is like a declaration of of almost, you
Yeah.
know, like war on our constitution of the people. And there's some things that are so fucking egregious. Today we found out they deported a fucking 2-year-old American citizen
Yeah.
with no process and no hearing. You know, and so there's like shit that happens, and you're like, he has a fucking meme coin where he's getting
Yeah.
billions of dollars paid into his meme coin. Nobody knows who's paying into his shit coin, you know? Like, it's so all this beyond the pale shit that's just like, you know, I just did a video today on my Twitter. It's my pinned post. It's like 3-4 minutes, but the DOJ issued a memo where now they're saying, well, we can do warrantless searches. We can, without a warrant, we can go into a migrant's home and a third person's home, because it says his residence, which could be a third person. Like, what if he's a roommate? They could barge in without a warrant, like violating the Fourth Amendment, running for a third, you know, taking a third term. I mean, these are fundamental basic things. Like, yes, you may have cared about all this shit, but you know, execution matters of like how you execute a policy, but also like this is so fucking like beyond the pale fascist totalitarian shit that like it should be fucking easy to leave now.
I think people get caught up in the wave of support because of the alternative, which is agreeing with the people who they think they are different from. You know, if that's a coherent thought, I'm cutting myself off from the whiskey, but I think people have this cognitive dissonance where they get to a point where, like, if they were 5 years ago, they could see that this would be an objectively bad place to place themselves in. But because of the people they have disagreeing with them, and because agreeing with them would mean, you know, in some sort of way submitting to them, they push back at their own expense and at the expense of millions of people.
Yeah.
You know, there is, whenever we say that this is fascism, you know, fascism is a broad term. And I tend to say that things like this are very reminiscent of like 1930s Germany. Things aren't, you know, we're not at Auschwitz yet, but
Right.
we're at the point where we're blaming groups of people for specific problems. We're demonizing groups of people. We are treating people like second-class citizens who do not fit specific criteria that we arbitrarily decide. And I say we as in, you know, the government.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, it's like arguing with your wife and you realize she's right, but you don't want to say she's right because you don't want to say you're wrong. So you double down and you argue harder, even though you know that you're wrong. Like, I'm not saying I do that because I'm a perfect husband, but I, you know, for both of you.
Sometimes I do like Twitter Spaces and stuff, and I like getting people on there who are like maybe voted for Trump. I'm like, look, you know what's cool about it is you get like hundreds of people on there, and you'll be like a guy who he has a business, and he's like, yeah, I make fans for computers, I sell them, and when Trump was talking about tariffs last year, I bought $250,000 worth of fans, and they just got here 2 weeks ago. And if I had waited a couple extra weeks because of the tariffs, I'd be out of business, and I'd fucking be my home would be getting foreclosed. You get all these cool people with like different perspectives and different situations relevant to current events. But yeah, like, you know, I tell people on there, look, it's okay. You can be against a third Trump term. You can be against sending people to an El Salvadoran gulag in violation of a court order, and then where they're going to go for life and they're not even convicted of a crime, you know, like in violating their own laws. And by the way,
He literally said we don't have time to give everyone a trial.
right. Yeah. And it's like complaining about that. Like, oh, due process is, you know, due process is inconvenient. And I mean, and the fact that we have to ask ourselves, the Supreme Court issues something fucking 9-0, even Thomas and Alito and, you know, saying you can't do this. And we have to sit there and say, is he going to comply? Is he going to comply? The fact that we have to have that concern, you know, like is really, that's fucked up. And like, you can be against that, even though you voted for Trump, and not necessarily agree with like, you know, men and women's sports or whatever very, you know, extreme position you think some people on the left might have. Like, it doesn't mean you're agreeing with that. You should have some pride that like, as a Republican, I'm willing to lose an election because I want to show that Republicans can govern in the right way. And I think this is another like hidden thing, and people don't see the damage that Donald Trump is doing to the own conservative movement is, you know, look at Doge, for example, right? Because they did it in such a fucked up, illegal, ham-handed way, you know, and like cut off USAID funding for like, you know, neonatal ICUs and, you know, like fucking somewhere in Africa or whatever. And like, you know, babies are dying and shit within weeks of Trump taking office. Because of that, now future government efficiency efforts are going to be harder because they're going to say, oh yeah, the last time we did that, this crazy asshole came in and a bunch of people fucking died. Our diplomats got stranded over there, you know, in a war zone. And so, like, that's another thing I try to tell conservative people who voted for Trump is like, look, these principles, these things you believe in, assuming you're not just in a complete cult and you actually do care about these conservative values, he's making it harder. He's destroying this because they're doing it wrong, in the wrong way. Like, immigration enforcement, every country should have rational immigration enforcement and have a border that works. I mean, it's the best thing for everybody. When you're immigration enforcement, it's just like this barbaric, due process violating, illegal, 2-year-olds. A 2-year-old born in New Orleans today, we found out, got sent to fucking some other country they don't even belong to. Or we're sending Afghans, people who helped Afghan interpreters back to Afghanistan to probably be killed. I mean, then it makes future immigration efforts harder. So, I mean, it's just like he's poisoning the well on the right and making it harder in the future. And he's also it's okay. Like, you can take a middle ground. Like, okay, I may not agree with the left, but I don't agree with this crazy shit.
I'm a libertarian, and most of my internet friends ended up being.
He doesn't fuck kids. Like, he's not that kind of libertarian.
No, no. Most of my internet friends ended up being weirdo leftists. But it's like, if I refused to associate with someone who just did not believe all of the things that I believe, I would have no friends.
Right.
The internet is not big enough for that.
Yeah, you have to be able to say, we may not agree on this particular domestic issue, but this other really pressing thing that could potentially destroy our fucking country, and not in a good way. Like we agree on that, and we can talk about that, and we can fight that together without making the presumption that we agree on everything else.
We've had this conversation, like you and I, Andrew, have had this conversation with people. I know I've had this conversation. Andrew has come in and called them like a motherfucking cunt kind of thing. Like, he's
I've got a different conversational style sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I really it's therapeutic to live vicariously through Andrew because he's not attached to the A Better Way to a page.
There's definitely some accounts I follow where I'm like, oh well, I'll let you say that. It's okay that likes your secret sometimes. So on Twitter.
Yeah,
dude, it's funny. Like, I'll get a random message or a comment tagging me in a reel that I liked on Instagram, completely separate from the typical stuff that we promote on our Instagram, which is gun rights and stuff. Like, 9/11 memes are particularly funny for some reason to me. I'm a firefighter full time. I have friends who were firefighters during 9/11. And I just think, after a certain amount of time, you should be allowed to joke about anything.
Yeah. It's not like, haha, people died.
No. Quick anecdote. So we had this conversation with somebody at work who, my friend and I at work were making, talking about 9/11 jokes. And we were laughing. And another guy walked in and he did not think they were funny. So he was wrong. But he was like, are you making fun of dead firefighters? But just by that question, I realizing his perspective was completely different than what ours was. I was like, no, we're not making fun of dead firefighters. We're honoring their memory through humor that they probably would have laughed at. It's one of those things, I could say until I'm blue in the face, listen, if I die on the job tomorrow, if I die in a gruesome way in a fire, I want you to joke about how I should have taken off, or how I was an idiot or whatever. Yeah, I just want you to make a stupid fucking joke about it. And that's my take on it. That's humor is subjective. You don't have to think that what I say is funny, but I'm saying it because I think it's funny.
People that close to have freedom to cope however they want, and that's a total normal coping mechanism. I think especially because kind of the shit in war and the fucking reels I get spammed by the guys in my unit still on Instagram. I can't even go on Instagram because the shit on my feed is just what is this? It's
there was a woman who was legitimately upset because this woman's husband died in 9/11 and she was shown an Etsy page of a shirt that was Garfield crashing a plane into 2 towers of lasagna.
Why did they show that to her? That's so fucked up.
Because the algorithm is so fucked. But that's legitimately funny. Garfield crashing a plane into 2 towers of lasagna. There's no, but she ended up. I'm fucking crying right now, dude, because that literally that made me laugh so hard. This is the thing about humor.
What was our point? How did we start talking about?
Bro, it ended up on the news because it was that serious of an issue. So she was upset because she was like, why would anybody make this? And her video of herself saying that was so...
That's so sad. I don't know why.
It was so sad. It was so sad.
Oh, that
But it
is
was...
sad.
But no, like legitimately, objectively, it is sad that she had these feelings. But me, as a fucking degenerate, I was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen.
I'm really hanging on the fact for cover that you're a firefighter and I can hide behind you as a coping mechanism.
Please
But
do,
that's
do.
That's like cosmically brutally funny. That's like
It's so bad. It's so bad, but it's so funny. It's like perfect example, dude. Our friend Eddie.
Yeah, our friend Eddie, he got hit by a fucking a drone with a shape charge on it, punched through his armored little ambulance. They were taking evacuees out of Pokrovsk, I think, at the time, and he lost his left arm and left leg.
Double amputee. This dude is. I just messaged him the other day to just tell him that like I'm so fucking proud of him and he's an inspiration. I don't even know what that means to somebody who lost an arm and a leg, because
like this guy's not a soldier. He wasn't there like fighting. He literally
he was bringing humanitarian aid to people. And a joke that I made with him though, because of the jokes that he was making already, which is what gave me the feeling that it was okay, which it was. So he wants to come to SHOT Show with us next year, and which we're like so fucking pumped. Dude, Eddie, if you're listening to this, I'm rock hard right now thinking about this. But
I'm getting there.
He was like, I want to come to
hard
SHOT.
men together.
I want hard men for hard times, easy times. He was like, yeah, I want to come to SHOT Show. And I was like, well, that'd be great, man. I'll book the seat next to you because that means I don't have to pay for extra leg room. And he fucking, I only made that joke because I assumed based on his humor, the jokes that he was making, that it was okay. Yeah. And he fucking left. And I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God.
You ever heard the aristocrat joke?
Yeah.
Well, no. You know, they're like horrible, but then I was like, you can only say that. Like, you can't go stand in the middle of Beijing and fucking say the aristocrats joke, okay? But you can do it in America for the most part.
Wait,
still.
What is? I don't know the joke.
So the short version, without actually doing the whole bit, it can change depending on who's.
Is it racist?
No, well, it could be, but basically it's
mainly sexual. It's disgusting sexual jokes about like bestiality and stuff like. But it's like it's
wow.
the most offensive
that
thing
went from 1 to 10 real quick.
Yeah. So the gist of the joke is this family is auditioning this act, and you detail the most like vile, disgusting sexual stuff that you can do. And the like person like taking their audition is like, that's the worst thing I've ever seen. What do you call this act? And they say the aristocrats.
It's an ode to free speech because it's so awful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Basically, it's like, okay, I can say this because I live in a free society. But yeah, no, sorry. He's never coming back on the podcast.
Oh, dude, you are far from our. Listen.
All right, great. Yeah.
I literally texted, I messaged Andrew at, what is this? 56 minutes ago, whatever that was. I said, the vibe, immaculate. We're good.
100%. Yeah.
What was that?
I was just going to say, like, the being a first responder, like I told you, like, when I was in Kherson, like, I literally was around a bunch of first responders of like, this is a dangerous area. Let me move because the Russians target them so much. And, you know, being a firefighter, you'll understand this. I mean,
well, to be clear, I'm a firefighter in America, not in Ukraine, so I'm not that cool.
Yeah, but I was in, you know, we're in Izium, and this is a city that's been occupied twice. It had a bunch of mass graves. You know, 80% of the buildings are destroyed or severely damaged. The team house I was staying in, we pay rent and build these houses up. You know, change water heater, fix the windows, things like that. But still, like the doors wouldn't shut from artillery damage and things of that nature. The house I was in. The owner was a businessman. He lived there with his wife, and they had a couple of dogs. The Russians came, shot and killed their dogs, sodomized him to try to get him to get money out of him, and, you know, like fucking lived in the house. And everybody in that street had a horrible story. Yeah. So we're like in this city that's been through so much, and the fire station's maybe 200 meters away, and they get some new fire engines donated. You know, they've been really good in Ukraine about emergency vehicles getting donated from all around the world. They're because they get destroyed a lot. They get targeted a lot. The way that we turn over, you know, fire equipment, we turn over, you know, engines and ambulances and stuff like that, you know, and they're still good. You know, there's 7 miles on them, but they still work for them and they need them. And so it's like fucking 2 a.m, you know, and it like literally the loudest explosion, the loudest sound, the thing I ever felt in my life. And it was 2 Iskander ballistic missiles. These are like 25 feet tall, 2,000-pound warheads going hypersonic, like Mach 5 to Mach 8, slammed into that fire station. These are like, multi-million-dollar missiles.
Christ.
And they spent boom, boom, and it like knocked me across the room. I grabbed my AK. I'm in my fucking underwear. I run outside because I didn't know if it was a drone targeting us because they like to target foreign fighters and stuff. There's no air defense there, and you're like 30 kilometers, 20 kilometers from the front or whatever. And like, so you grab your rifle. I was outside in my underwear, like within like 5 seconds, literally taking up a fighting position, just out of instinct. And, I'm like thinking to myself, man, like these fucking Russians like just spent like $15 million to try to blow up a fire engine, It's just a trip. I don't know. I mean, like to see that they would like go to those lengths for that. Yeah. And there I am standing in my underwear and shit, with no body armor at fucking 3 a.m.
Calendar shot.
I know. But it's just crazy. I was just thinking about that. And, I mean, how dangerous it is there. And like, actually they get targeted all the fucking time. It's for stabilization points, ambulances. I mean, like hospitals. The double taps. They do double taps all the fucking time,
Yeah, where they do a small attack on a few people and wait for first responders to show up and then hit it again. That was the what was that Matt Damon movie that did that?
It's not a Matt Damon. It was you're talking about The Kingdom.
Wasn't it Green Zone?
Green
No,
Zone was Matt
you're right.
Damon.
You're
Did
right.
they do that in Matt Damon?
It was
Did
the
they do that in
Kingdom.
Green
It was the
Zone?
Kingdom.
Yeah,
You're
it
right.
was
You're right.
Kingdom.
Yeah. They just did that in Sumi like 2 weeks ago, and
Yeah, with the ambulance.
on fucking Palm Sunday, I mean, it's like,
Yep.
again, like these are like, and we talk about like, where does your humanity go, or what's it like, in war? Do you get desensitized? You're like, every time you want to like kind of feel sorry that that's somebody's kid or somebody's brother that got killed, it's like they fucking hit the middle of a goddamn city, Palm Sunday, and there's some little girl crying, looking around for her mother, and like her arm's blown off. I mean, then it's just like,
On the other side of it, on the Ukrainian side of it, think about the fucking balls of steel you got to be a paramedic or a firefighter in Ukraine to know that double tap is coming, but also to know that you can't not go. You know that they might hit you when you get there, but you still have to go and start digging bodies out because you can't. You can't let them put that fear in you and just leave the bodies there.
Well, it's your job, and you chose that job. Yeah,
you started, but you understand too, like the dynamics of things of weekend. We're so lucky in America that we have oceans separating us, like because when you talk to that Ukrainian firefighter, they'll show you pictures of like, their grandparents in the Holodomor famine caused by Stalin, where millions of people died on purpose. And like, this is like you see this person here with like no shoes out in the snow. Fucking that's like the one person in my family who didn't die in that intentional famine. And so like they have that history. Like, it's like that history that they is part of who they are, and like they understand it. And I think it's kind of gives them a lot of their strength.
Kind of animates them a little bit. I could imagine just like freezing up. Like, it's like, I could imagine like being a paramedic and knowing that there's a call out and just like waiting.
But it's really interesting you say that, because that's your perspective as somebody who's never had to deal with that.
Exactly.
And you imagine like people who are there doing this are conditioned to deal with that. I remember taking as early as my EMT class, I remember doing our ride along portion where it was our first time any of us had ever been on an ambulance before. And there was a woman who had to do CPR on someone, and it was that moment that she decided that she was not cut out for being an EMT, because she could not bring herself to do CPR on someone. And I couldn't even count how many times I've done CPR on somebody, but there are things that I would not be comfortable. Like there are things that would shock me. Still, like as an EMT, because I'm not an EMT in a war zone, I'm not an EMT that's constantly dealing with my neighbors dying in front of me, and that's something that us as as a Western civilization have such a luxury to avoid. We don't have a neighbor that is able to reach us because of a war that we're involved in right now. Every war that we're involved in is with a third world country. We're bombing the fuck out of Syria right now. We're bombing. We're sending stuff to Ukraine, but like barely. I mean, we're that's hanging on by a thread right now, and we're not being touched by that because it's people on the other side of the world. There's a certain level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like there's a certain level of normalization that you have to have as a first responder in a war zone, that, you know, even somebody who's been, like, I've been a firefighter EMT for 8, almost 9 years, and I guarantee you, you know, a year in Ukraine, I'd see more than I've seen where I am now, and probably worse.
Yeah.
You know, but that's normal for these people, and these people block it out.
Yeah, and they have. I mean, they know they have to. Like, it's because they know they have family that's living under occupation in Mariupol right now, where there's like 60,000 dead civilians. You know, and God knows what else. And I talked to people that were able to they were under occupation, were able to bribe their way out, and it's like rugs rolled up everywhere, all over the place, and they're all dead bodies. You know, the thing that, you know, one of the big mistakes Putin made in the war, the invasion is, the entire thing is a war of aggression. It's illegal. It's awful. But like, to continue attacks on civilians reminds people daily that, like, this and the occupation and the things that happen under occupation, that if you don't fight back, you'll be living in worse than hell. But he doesn't have the concept of not doing things that's going to, you know, motivate people even more. Just like the Nazis didn't understand that when they bombed Britain during the Blitz, you know, is that because he's so fucking barbaric, he just doesn't get it. He doesn't know any other way. Well,
he's so punitively minded that the only way that he can make sense of what he's doing is that, you know, these ungrateful people who he tried to do this favor for them by taking over their country and eliminating their culture, and they had the gall to take up arms against him, and so he's got to punish them so that they understand what they did wrong and what the correct course of action is, you know.
And it's a trip like the history too. Like, another thing that's very different from Americans. Like, I went there and I remember Kyiv you're sitting there and you're like, this city is 1,547 fucking years old.
Yeah.
1,547 years old. And you're like,
that's insane.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. And then like on the anniversary of that 1,547th day, it's 11 a.m. I have video of this. I can send you. It's pretty interesting. But 11 a.m. you're sitting there, you're walking to get breakfast or something, or whatever it is. And, you know, there's like kids walking down the street, there's rush hour traffic or whatever. And, you know, like, it's a vibrant city. Like 11 a.m. and you hear the air raid sirens and you look up and you see a fucking Patriot missile. And like intercepting ballistic missiles over the fucking city. There's like 5 or 6. And then like kids start running, and then like people like go into the subways and stuff. It's like, this is like so surreal and so like something we can't possibly understand, like just the history of everything and what's happening now, and the depths of this is like, it's beyond the Western understanding and concept, especially in America. It's just a trip, man. Like, you know, you really come to appreciate what we have here, and it's, and, you know, even more sad to see like things sacrificed, like freedom sacrificed by current administration. You know, understanding that.
How do you think that we can reach people who have not changed their mind the way that you have? What do you think? Like, what do you think is missing?
People look for historical parallels a lot, and there are some, you know, but there's also the one thing that's missing that's very corrosive and awful is that online disinformation complex, you know, that the tribalism, the siloing, you know, of, I think, especially on the right, there's a huge ecosystem of people who are the right-wing influencers. You know, there's left-wing influencers, but the right-wing influencers are like, these people, I just think they're objectively worse. I don't like to generalize things, but like, they are objectively worse. And like, in
what way?
I feel like, you know, I
agree with you, but for the people who are listening, like,
yeah, they're more organized, they're more shameless, and they're just entirely focused on continuing false narratives from the administration, because that's how they make their living. Period. You know, and I don't think they really believe a lot of what they say, because it's absurd. You know, like the mental gymnastics, the things that they do to try to like justify things, and anything Donald Trump does, you know, like look at the tariffs. Oh, you know, it's to bring manufacturing back. Okay, well then he just canceled the tariffs, and it's like, well, yeah, but he reached trade deals. I mean, it constantly changes, and you know, and especially like when you look at it like with Ukraine, it's like, oh, you know, Zelensky bought a yacht with the money, and I'm like, he was rich before the war. What the fuck are you talking about? Like,
yeah, dude, he's like a famous comedian, right?
And he had a TV show called Servant of the People where he actually played the president of Ukraine. It's like so surreal.
Yeah. But people will like talk shit about him and be like, he was a movie actor. He was on a reality show. Yeah. Dude, what the fuck was Trump?
Yeah.
Like,
and what was Reagan? Reagan was an actor. I mean, you know, like, it's so ridiculous. And I'm like, and he didn't leave, you know, when like everybody's like, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. I mean, like, say whatever the fuck you want about the guy, but like 99% of people would have left. Okay. And he's led his people, and he's, tried to do the right thing, and he works constantly. I mean, you see, he's always posting at like midnight. They're 8 hours ahead of us. That's how you know, like, I don't know. I mean, how to reach the people. I honestly think, and I hate to say this, that things have to get so bad and so obvious and so clear that it gets to a point where it's no longer deniable and there's actual consequences. I think that we have become, as the World War II generation dies off, and those people who actually saw like real sacrifice and understand that what's important in life, I don't know if it's because of consumerism or whatever it may be, but there has to be, unfortunately, I feel, because I've seen nothing else that works, there has to be consequences for actions. People have to learn that it matters. Like, you can't be so selfish as to vote for someone who is an election denier, who tried to organize a coup because you don't like the immigration policies or something else. There has to be certain things like value, character has to matter in who you vote for. You have to actually try to educate yourself about who you're voting for or what political beliefs you have. We've completely lost that, and it's just like, who do I hate the most? And it's a contest, and
yeah, people are going to have to suffer as a direct result of it for it to get better.
I say this to people, like, trans people are the low hanging fruit right now, because I feel like they are the ammunition for the culture war, unfortunately. And like, I know we have a bunch of trans followers, and I know we have a bunch of trans listeners, and just guesstimating based on percentages, dude, it's gotta fucking suck to be like, as a straight white cis dude who's currently wearing his hat backwards on a fucking podcast. like I've got privilege. I realize the fuck out of that. It's hard. Like, privilege is like the long dick of privilege is in my ass right now, and I feel it all the time. And like, I'm gonna use that from now on. But like, it is soberingly apparent to me that there are demographics of people who do not have the kind of privilege that we have. I don't think a transphobe. I don't think a person. So let me preface this by saying I don't think most transphobes hate trans people. I think most transphobes are convinced that trans people are this weird fucking ghoul of a person who they think they are based on mainstream media narratives and like uber conservative talking points. I think the majority of think that trans people are like trying to prey on children and like get into women's bathrooms and stuff like that for nefarious reasons, not because that they just want to piss in there. This is probably more generous than transphobes deserve, but I think the majority of transphobes just need to meet a fucking trans person and just need to talk to someone.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. I think the majority of these people would not realize the error in their ways until they saw a trans person at the end of a firing squad.
Right. The thing about being Ukraine too is, like, you see, I know several trans soldiers, and they do a good job, and like, everything's fine and nobody cares, and it's like, these are people who are, they also think that, like, they think these things are like some kind of like choice or something like that, or and they also don't realize that there's a lot of people out there, like, they take like the most vocal offensive, who they perceive as offensive person, and try to paint everybody in that group like that. It's like every gun owner is obviously like some MAGA person who's like, driving around, with a gun or whatever, at like rallies and stuff, trying to intimidate people.
Bro, there are insane trans people out there because there are insane people out there.
Yeah.
Like, and a percentage of them are going to be trans. Like, that's the way that it works. You can find the most unhinged fucking gun owner out there and use him to represent, or her, but probably him, and probably white, and probably straight. Like, you can use him to describe, to represent every single gun owner. But a logical person does not do that because they realize that they do not represent the majority. And logical people can see, like, the Christ, what was the Christian school shooter, trans person shooter? Not Christchurch.
The Tennessee one.
Yeah. I think. I don't even know. But
Covenant School.
Covenant School. Thank you. I'm thinking Halo. A logical person can see that and understand that that's not representative of the majority of trans people. But then the opposite end of the spectrum uses that as justification to hate all trans people. It's no different than a racist. It's no different than an anti-Semite.
Like, I think people, like, it's also like, how were you raised, and like, what is your thought process and philosophy for how you look at people?
You're raised like a cunt.
Yeah, right. You should say, when you see a trans person, you should say, like, look, I'm not going to like focus on our differences or whatever. I'm going to say, their rights to just live the way they want to and be left alone and to like express themselves, well, that's like right of expression. That's right of self-determination. You know, like these are like civil rights, you know, I mean, these are the
Bro, and how many of these people, I can tell I need to cut off from the whiskey right now because I've used bro.
I thought
like
you
6
already cut
times.
yourself off.
I did, but then I
You dipped back
I
in.
uncut. I uncut myself. I think I'm doing okay. I'm doing much better than I was in the Bryn episode where I was just like, so you've got quite a following. So you're gonna just OnlyFans? Like it was you know, in my head, when you're at the level of drunk where you're like, I need to stop, and then somebody else is like, you need to stop. It was a fun episode, and Bryn, if you're listening to this right now, I'm so sorry we have to record again. She was like, she's so cool. This chick was like, okay, and this is gonna like, I use the term chick as a term of endearment, like it's just something I've grown up with. It's not like a demeaning thing, but my wife is like, you should probably stop calling women chicks. Yeah, it's broad. Whatever. I could be wrong. Women who listen to this podcast, all 3 of you, please let me know.
Is chick demeaning?
Yeah,
We're taking it back.
I don't know. Call me bro. I'm like, whatever. I want to know if I truly offend people. Like I'm willing to change that for that. But Bryn was so cool about this. I was like, hey, I'm really sorry. We might have to re-record everything because I have no idea what happened to it. And apparently Descript, the company that we use right now, does not save cloud backups. So once you delete it, you're fucked. So there might have been a reason that I might have deleted it by accident, but I don't know. Bryn was like, yeah, no, cool. I'll just pretend I don't know you. And we haven't had this conversation before. So when you listen to an episode with Bryn Woods, just realize that she's acting, which she should be good at.
You had somewhere you were going before this though that we kind of like lost our way on.
Story of my life.
I think we were talking about consequences. We were talking about like people who have convinced themselves of this untrue thing. They're not going to realize how wrong they are and the consequences of acting on that until they see their neighbors getting like rounded up and murdered.
Their neighbors they care about, not the ones they're racist against.
Yeah.
It's really just, it's like, I don't know, it's like a dissatisfying thing to say, like, I wish there was some way, like, you hear like a lot of the left, you know, it's just, we have like the right-wing media ecosystem. It sort of started by like Rush Limbaugh, then like the podcasters, and then like, you know, the Joe Rogans and stuff who, you know, just, now they just have like, they've like devolved to the level where it's just like one fucking anti-Semite after another coming on their shows and completely factually allergic to everything.
Some of them paid by Russia.
Yeah, paid by Russia, exactly. Like, you know, fucking Tim Pool, like in the fucking, you know.
Tim Pool is in the White House. He's in the White House.
What's under the beanie, Tim? What's under the beanie, Tim?
There's nothing. It's an antenna.
Right. And it was like, oh my, you know, like when you're at that level, it's like, okay, she just needs to get fucked up. There has to be consequences.
Do you ever just see somebody who you hate so much you want to call them a slur?
Yeah.
You know, not like a homophobic slur or anything like that, but like sometimes I
just
want to call
not like a
somebody
racial homophobic slur, but just like
no. Sometimes I just want to call somebody a fucking retard. Like, I just want to use it. I just want to use the word. Just once. Like, my sister is mentally disadvantaged. I don't know what we're supposed to say now. I haven't talked to her in years because she's dating a man who gaslit her into thinking we were assholes. But anyway, that's a story for my therapist. I just want to call Tim Pool a retard. I just don't. Sorry, that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say it again because that's too much. I don't want it to be gluttonous.
I need, you know, I have to behave myself a little bit on Twitter because I don't want to get banned because I have a bigger message I'm trying to help with, you know, that matters. But yeah, these
they're literal Nazis on Twitter. What do you have to behave for?
Because you never know. Well, because like they give special privileges to like the big accounts that are Nazis.
Yeah, if you're anti-Nazi, you have to behave. If you're a Nazi, you get a free pass.
Right. 100%. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I just sort of sitting back and, you know, like pointing things out and letting people understand what's happening, you know, with the Trump administration, the kind of the anti-democratic things that are happening, you know, which
I know. I really think you're doing a good job. Like I like your Twitter a lot, and I wish there was a way for me to add you to like so I'm primarily on Instagram, and there's a way to add people to your favorites. So that you can see them first. I wish there was a way to do that on Instagram because every time I catch one of your tweets or whatever, I go on your Twitter, I'm like, this dude's pumping out gold. And I just really appreciate your perspective, and I love that you're wearing I know it's a only you can prevent communism, can defeat communism shirt, but the U.S. Forest Service has a Blue Sky account that is like a fucking guerrilla information.
Oh yeah, I've
warfare
seen that.
account.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Dude, it's so good. It's so good, and it makes me. It's literally just pointing out hypocrisy from the Trump administration, but it's like a National Forest Service account.
Yeah, I've seen that. No, they do a good job for sure, 100%.
I appreciate people like you. I'm just stroking you off real quick for the people at home. It's
I sit here and I'm like, I'm glad to hear that it makes sense and it's cogent and stuff, because I every time there's a missile attack in Ukraine, like there's people that I care about and that I dearly love there. There's an 88-year-old woman I know who's got cancer, whose home was bombed into oblivion in Mariupol, who never harmed anybody in her entire life, and is just like the sweetest person in the world. And just story after story after story after story like that. That's the people I think about every time. Got to say something, got to make a voice heard. Got to be a voice of reason. Fuck this. Like whatever happens, we'll go down fighting. Because we're headed, to a dark place, and I don't want history to record that. We're here doing this. And if you ask about how do we change people's minds, the fact this, your organization, for example, was really happy to come on the podcast and get to know you guys better, is because, the fact that what you're doing, that the Second Amendment does not have to be a only right-wing thing. It is no, it's a constitutional right. It's not a political fucking party. Okay. It is a fundamental constitutional right, the highest constitutional right. So there's different layers of constitutional rights. There's constitutional rights and there's fundamental constitutional rights. And one subject to strict scrutiny, meaning it's harder to regulate. It gets more protection under the law than other constitutional rights. It's the highest constitutional right. We don't say freedom of speech belongs to the right or the left. It belongs to everybody. Right. And so and showing people that you can be pro Second Amendment and have whatever political beliefs you want, as long as you agree with the fundamentals of that. So what you guys are doing is there's an answer to this. I mean, I guess people just have to be willing to listen, have to have an open mind, and have to be receptive, and I hope that comes without bad things happening. I fear it won't, though. The point is also there will be a recreation of a new world. There will be a new world, a new philosophy, a new order that comes out of this. I don't want to say the ruins, because that sounds really morbid, but out of whatever happens, the post-Trump world, the post-Trump era, and that's you can build something better. There's something, Martin Luther King had this speech that he did. It was called "A Time for Change." It was one of his later speeches. And it was about Vietnam, but it was about some other things too. But he said in this speech, he talked about and I send this to people in Ukraine a lot, and it's about hope in circumstances that seem impossible. And there's this part of the speech where he talks about the slave foreparents of current African Americans in the United States, that for hundreds of years they had nothing to look forward to. They were ripped from their home, they lost their culture, they lost their language, families were sold into slavery and separated. And nothing to look forward to for hundreds of years, except the blistering heat, picking cotton, and the rawhide whip of the overseer. But they still found a way to believe and to have faith in a better tomorrow, and to keep going and going and going. And you don't know how strong you can be until you truly believe and are put in a situation where you have to. The sweltering injustice of a period in time, a historical period in time. And I feel like the good people who choose to be good will rise to the occasion and make a better place out of this when it comes after that, and maybe that's just stubbornness on my part to believe that, but I've seen the Ukrainians do it, so we're going to fucking do it. That's what I have to believe.
No, I think you have to be an optimist. If you believe in rights and you believe in freedom and you believe in individuality in the, philosophical sense, not the practical sense. I think you have to be an optimist, and you have to believe that, people are going to get it. People are going to wake up. People are going to come together, And
we all have kids, man, so we don't have a choice,
Yeah.
Dude, I think about this stuff all the time. I had a 2.5 hour long conversation with my financial advisor today. The most dry, fucking depressing conversation I could ever have. But I wouldn't have that conversation if I didn't think that I could do better than my parents. Believing that I could provide my kid a better life than my parents provided me. My parents provided me a great life. I am the way that I am, whatever. But I could do better.
Yeah, Jordan turned out perfect. I'll take no criticism on this position.
And Andrew pumps me up all the time. I fucking love it. I don't see. I was literally just. Can I just tell you? I was watching you talk to John, and I was like, I fucking miss this dude. I miss seeing his face. I fucking miss this guy.
We only get to hang out when we record podcasts.
I know it's not enough. But anyway, like, you know, it's dude, it is so refreshing to hear you say that, because I struggle deeply with the current political atmosphere, and especially in leftist circles, because I find that, you know, there are certain groups that I love working with. I love Yellow Peril Tactical. I love working with the folks from there. I love working with, I love talking to you. So like, I've met a bunch of really cool people. Crimson Cami, I think her name is, on Instagram. Just positive people in the leftist space, because I feel like it is such an outlier. Listen, if you believe that the current state of things is grim, that's just honest. That's just an observation.
But if you believe like it can't get better, and
it can't get better,
yeah,
and that it's not worth trying to improve, and we're just waiting for the collapse, and we're just going to build from the ashes. Like, listen, if it comes to that, we will absolutely do that. I know that, because as humans, we're used to.
Yeah, but why resign yourself to it?
Yes, exactly. Things can be better. People, you know, this is why I have an American flag in front of my house. This is why I fly an American flag in front of my house. Not because I support Trump, but because I think this country, unironically, can be fucking great. I don't think we're going to make it great again, because I don't think it is ever at its true potential. But I think we can be. And I believe in the people in this country, and I believe in the fact that we've been here for, granted, we're a baby in the context of the world's history. And I think things will get worse before they will get better. But I do think things will get better, and I think we'll all be better as a result of it. And I look at that as the motivation for what we do, because I don't see this as as a means to an end. Like, I need to get as many people on my side with guns as possible because of the war that's coming. I see this as a way to empower people to realize that self-sufficiency, that lack of reliance on systems that are designed to fail you, that have historically failed the people over and over and over again, is going to be empowering and freeing, realizing that you are your own first responder, because you know how to stop bleeding, how to fight against somebody trying to hurt you, how to do things that that we're conditioned to rely on services that historically do not care about the most marginalized populations, or are underfunded or underutilized to serve the most marginalized populations. Like, that's where I see like this whole thing being a net positive, not because I want to arm some leftist Soros-funded militia. Like, that's, you know, listen, if Soros was giving checks out, like, I would love to get them.
If you are, hold on, pause. If you are getting Soros money, please spend it on guns. I guarantee you, it's just
please,
that's just the funniest.
Please buy a Better Way
shit.
to a stickers. yeah, no, exactly, 100%. Whenever I hear somebody have a positive outlook on the current state of things, or just in general, it's to me like a big middle finger to the system, and middle finger to the mainstream media, and middle finger to social media. And so it's very, you know, I appreciate it. I appreciate hearing that kind of stuff. I'm sure people listening appreciate hearing that kind of mentality, because things are just doom scrolling all the time. Like, Andrew, you shared something on your story the other day that was like, change is like, I could be a different person than I was earlier. I am objectively worse than I was an hour ago after doom scrolling for an hour or whatever. Like, it was something like that. I
well, you know, like, yeah, because like I'm in Mountain Time Zone, and you know, and like the president, unfortunately, you know, he's in Eastern Time Zone, so like every day I wake up, I'm like, it's 8 o'clock. He's 2 hours ahead of me. Like, what did he do now? You know,
he's like 2 hours of shit post ahead of me.
Oh no!
What sort of turd in the bull surprise am I going to wake up to today? Right? You know, when you like open Twitter, but you know, but it's sort of like, you know, I mean, I'm going to fight back, whatever. Like, it's and what the system is doing. I mean, like when you put stupid people who are just like sycophants and will just say whatever you want in power, and you're really undermining yourself. He's really undermining himself, and we see like. You know, his poll numbers going down below the 40s and stuff, you know, and so like, this is inevitable, and we're going to fight back. And this is, you know, America's, you know, it's my America too. So I will keep fighting,
Bro, fuck yes.
Fuck yeah.
It makes me want to punch a fucking eagle in the face. Oh.
Makes me want to get in a van full of fertilizer and drive down to the federal building.
For no reason whatsoever, FBI.
This is a joke. This is a joke.
This is a joke. This is a joke. Do not do that. Andrew, I was telling John earlier, I was like, I got to be honest. I wanted you to come on the podcast based on vibes only. I was like, I don't know. I've seen your Twitter feed.
I am familiar with your Twitter.
I am familiar with your tweets. I was just like, John seems like a cool dude. He'd be a fun guy to have a conversation with. Did not disappoint at all. I thought this was a great episode. Talked about a bunch of really important stuff.
And furthermore, Russia must be destroyed.
Absolutely. I'm very thankful for you guys and your organization, and hopefully we'll continue working together and doing great things. I think this is really critical. Like you guys and what you've built is super important to, philosophically as in the area that you guys work, but also like just as a broader example, for how we can do things. An example for, other organizations that want to have broad principles based focus, and like, 'cause that's where we're going to have to go. It's a metaphor for how things are going to get better, I think.
I agree.
Well, you're going to make me blush.
You can make me come. Or sorry. Anyway, it's time to leave. It's time dude, so can I just tell you, like, this is the group of people that we had. I'm so sorry, John. I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry, man. I'm all good. I like the barracks humor. It's all good.
Oh man, you continue to impress. I was told by like 4 people at work the other day that I'm a horrible judge of what I should be saying around certain people.
That's a really specific criticism.
Have you ever seen that show Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David?
I love Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Remember the MAGA hat episode where he's like going in the sushi bar and it's like somebody said the waitress comes to, we'll sit next to him. There's 2 empty seats. And he's like, I want to sit by. Puts on a MAGA hat, and like the people, it's like fucking repellent of everything.
Yeah.
So anytime Larry David is in a social situation in Los Angeles and he wants to be alone, he puts on a MAGA hat. And whenever sitting around him, would leave. Okay, so like that's kind of what you're talking about. Like,
I was just thinking, like, man, I really hope Larry David is not a Zionist, and that's probably an indicator that he's not.
Well, he did this great like thing. Bill Maher met with Donald Trump and like came on a show and was saying, "Oh, he's all normal, he's all this and that." And then Larry David wrote something in the New York Times. He said, "My dinner with Adolf," to make fun of. Because Bill Maher was like normalizing Trump, and Larry David wrote like this parody. Yeah, it was great. It was a great social commentary and comedy.
I love Curb. Like it's one of those things that like, it's like, you know what it is? It's like Always Sunny. I've never watched a full season of Always Sunny, but it's one of the shows that whenever I see an episode from, I'm like, this is fucking hilarious. I need to watch this. And right. But it lives in this ether space in my mind, because if I don't watch a full season, it doesn't fully exist. Anyway, I don't know. John, if you had one piece of advice. Sorry.
We're losing him.
No. We're good.
My wife just brought me tea. Hold on.
Oh my God. Andrew's wife is so adorable. She constantly brings him snacks and drinks while he's podcasting.
Amazing.
No, he's like, wait, he's it. Oh shit, I forgot to mute. Sorry, bud.
Hi, I love you.
I'm just joking. I did that on purpose. I'm sorry. That was a bit.
Starbucks refresher?
That's boba, right?
Boba, buddy.
That's amazing. Yeah. Where'd you get a boba at 11:30 at night?
Because I live in a fully functional city with fucking deliveries at night. You doofus.
Oh my God, this guy.
Sorry you live in the middle of fucking nowhere in Connecticut, putting out fires and shit. You moron.
All right, John. If you had one piece of advice for people listening right now, it could be related to what we were talking about or not. What would that piece of advice be?
That's a good question. This is your country too, and this is your life, and this is your time, and you cannot escape history. Believe in yourself. Believe in the cause of things that are good, and believe in each other. And stay positive, keep fighting, never give up.
I fucking love that, dude.
You're still breathing. You're still in the fight, buddy.
Oh, God. Right. Like I said, it makes me want to punch a fucking eagle. I love that. Seriously, I don't mean that in a cheesy, optimistic, we're going to make it kind of way. I truly believe that mentality, there's a reason psychological warfare is so powerful. Because if you demoralize an enemy, you can win. And if you stay positive and if you stay,
let me give you I'll give you an anecdote. Actually, I don't mean to cut you off. I'll give you an anecdote.
Cut
Okay,
me
so
off.
the last place I was staying in Kyiv, there was, like ballistic missile attacks a lot, and there was, air raid sirens all the time, and you would see children being taken to and from school. So the place I was staying was pretty close to a school, and you could tell, like, as parents, like, by how a child is dressed, the level of care and love that went into that child's day, like their shoes match their backpack and their clothes are all like new and clean. And like, you can tell a child with love just by the way they're dressed and the way they're going to school. And, and you see, like, during air raid sirens, children going to and from school, but there was also a music school, and you would hear like beautiful violin, and you would look in the window, and there's like an 8 or 9-year-old. The Ukrainians, by the way, are like extremely musical people and very artistic and deep culture. He sees this child playing this perfect violin beautifully, 8 or 9 years old, during an air raid siren. And it's like so poignant and so beautiful and so resilient. I've seen that example, and like with the true unadulterated, like good, removed from all the ignorance and bullshit, brought together by war, there is a better day. There is a love in this world. And like, I've seen it. We need to be a force for good in America. And, maybe there's some bad things Trump's doing now, but what those people have, it lives within us. We just have to find it.
Hell yeah.
I love that, man. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, man. I feel like there's unironically, I feel like there's like a beauty to everything. And, kids especially are, you as a dad know this, like kids are that. It's something I never understood before I was a dad. There are days where like I'm so completely overwhelmed by everything going on in the world and in my day. And my daughter will say something like, I'll be walking out the door and she'll say, but you're going to come back because mommy and daddy always come back. Dude.
Yeah.
Like, because I told her, like, when she was real young and she was getting upset when I would leave for work.
Yeah, we say the same thing. Yeah. It's like,
I would tell her, like, oh, don't worry, honey. Like, daddy will be back. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm always going to come back for you. And, like, it's something that you say so nonchalantly, but it's something that she's committed to her memory.
Yeah.
And you say things like this, like that's a thing that has, like, built a structure in her life. Like, there is some kid in Ukraine where music has been a grounding force for them. And dude, I wasn't in a war zone as a kid.
As the whole fucking world is coming apart, the kid cares enough to be practicing music. Not to be making a masterpiece now, but to be practicing for the future.
When Izzy was liberated, they were playing violin on the hill leading, as you go out to out to the Donbass and next Oblast, and but like there's videos of this. I'll shoot you a link, like just short videos of like playing violin during war, and like there's a beauty to resilience, and like we got it too, which is when we're gonna do it. They're a country that always looked up to us in a way because like they were stuck under Soviet rule for a long time. Like when you're in Kyiv, like during Christmas time, they play like it's American music in English in the fucking malls. It's a trip, dude. You feel like you could be in fucking Illinois. Okay. Like there's like a photo of like James Dean or like, Al Pacino, like the coffee shops or whatever, like, but like, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, but they're leading us, like, cause like they're being more expressive of like the values of freedom and things that we should believe in than like we are right now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, it's okay that we can learn from them and understand like what they're going through, and because it can make us better as a people and make the world better too.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think perspective's everything, and I think every now and then we need a dose of that, and if it's got to come from people from another country, then having these conversations is what's really important, because I think part of the reason I wanted to have you on is because I feel so guilty that this, when this war started, you saw a Ukrainian flag in almost every home, like in the U.S. And I feel like people are forgotten at this point, that it's still going on and that it's still very, very important, and that it's essential to the direction that the world is going to go in. I'm glad we had you on, man.
Man,
I think it was an excellent episode.
I appreciate it too. Very grateful. Thank you so much.
Likewise, man. I appreciate everything you're doing, everything you've done. I know it's not easy. It hasn't been easy. So, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service, brother. Unironically.
Thank you. But I always say this, and with all humility, it was a privilege to serve those people. It was a privilege to be there. It changed my life. I learned a lot. All glories to the Ukrainian people, the men, women, and children fighting. The thousands of women in combat, the men in combat, the men who've had kids and they've been on the front for so long they've never even seen their child, been there maybe 2-3 years old. So glories to all of them, and with all humility, and just continue to support them in heart and soul and every way we can. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, man. All right, John. Well, on that note, fuck yeah.